Avoid financial disaster. The emergency fund you can't afford to ignore. Hey there. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had one of those weeks where everything seems to go wrong all at once? Maybe the car suddenly decides it's done working, the washing machine floods the laundry room, or you get hit with an unexpected medical bill that feels like a punch to the gut. And you're left sitting there, staring at your bank account, wondering, how am I going to deal with all this? The truth is, life is unpredictable. It doesn't matter how carefully we plan, things can and do go wrong. And when they do, having a financial safety net can mean the difference between a temporary inconvenience and a full-blown financial disaster. That's exactly why today, we're talking about building an emergency fund. Now, before you click away thinking, oh, I've heard this before, hear me out. Building an emergency fund isn't just some boring financial advice thrown around by experts who've never had to live paycheck to paycheck. It's real, practical, and it's one of the most powerful financial tools you can create for yourself and your family. An emergency fund is basically money set aside specifically for life's unexpected events. Think of it like a financial cushion that's there to catch you when life decides to throw a curveball. And look, this isn't just about money, it's about peace of mind, having a sense of control, and not living with the constant anxiety of what if. Now, you might be wondering, why is this so important, especially for people like us, in our 30s or even older? Well, here's the thing. By the time you hit 30, life often starts getting a lot more complicated. Maybe you've got a family to support, a mortgage to pay, or a career that's demanding more from you than ever. And with all of that, comes financial responsibilities that are just not going away. When you have so many responsibilities, one unexpected event can throw everything off balance. And let's be real, no one is immune to emergencies. Whether it's a sudden job loss, a health crisis, or an urgent home repair, life has a funny way of hitting us where it hurts. And that's why having an emergency fund isn't just a smart idea, it's a necessity. But let's talk about what happens when you don't have one. When an emergency hits and you don't have savings to fall back on, the most common response is to turn to credit cards or loans. Sure, it solves the problem in the moment, but then you're left dealing with high-interest debt that just keeps growing. And if you're already juggling bills, kids, and work, adding debt into the mix is like pouring gasoline on a fire. So, what does an emergency fund actually do for you? Well, first of all, it gives you breathing room. Instead of panicking and reaching for a credit card, you can take care of the problem and move on. It gives you choices, real, practical choices. You're not forced into borrowing money or making rash decisions. Instead, you're in control because you've prepared yourself for life's unpredictability. And let's be clear, having an emergency fund doesn't mean you have to be wealthy or financially perfect. It's about being smart with what you have. Even if you're starting from scratch, just putting away a little bit at a time can make a huge difference. It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you can set aside, even if it's just a few dollars a week. But here's the thing. Building an emergency fund isn't just about avoiding debt. It's about creating a safety net that allows you to keep moving forward, even when life tries to knock you down. Think about the relief you'd feel knowing that if your car breaks down, you can fix it without sacrificing next month's rent. Or if you lose your job, you have enough saved to keep your family afloat while you figure out your next move. And beyond all of that, having an emergency fund gives you confidence. It's the knowledge that you're prepared, no matter what happens. It's financial peace of mind, and that's something you can't put a price tag on. Now that we've talked about why building an emergency fund is so important, let's get into how you can actually start building one, even if you're on a tight budget. Alright, so we've established why having an emergency fund is crucial. But how do you actually start building one, especially when money is tight and life keeps throwing bills at you faster than you can keep up? That's where a lot of people get stuck. They hear about the idea of an emergency fund and think, sounds great, but how am I supposed to save when there's barely enough to cover the basics? Well, the good news is, you don't have to be rich or even comfortable financially to start building an emergency fund. What matters most is consistency and having a plan. So, let's break this down into practical, doable steps that anyone can start right away. The first step is setting a clear goal. If you don't know what you're working toward, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and give up before you even start. A good rule of thumb for an emergency fund is to have at least 3 to 6 months worth of essential living expenses saved up. That might sound like a huge number, but remember, you don't have to get there all at once. You can start small and build gradually. For example, instead of thinking about that big number, start with a smaller, more achievable goal. Maybe it's saving your first $500 or $1,000. That amount alone can handle most minor emergencies, like a car repair or a sudden medical bill. And when you hit that first milestone, you can feel good about your progress and keep building from there. Now, let's talk about how to actually save. Because it's one thing to say, I want to save money, and a whole other thing to actually do it. One of the most effective strategies is making your savings automatic. Seriously, automation can be a game changer. If you have a steady paycheck, consider setting up an automatic transfer from your checking account to a dedicated savings account every month. Even if it's just $20, $50, or $100 at a time, it adds up. And the best part? You don't even have to think about it. It's like paying yourself first before you have a chance to spend that money on something else. But what if your income isn't stable, like if you're self-employed or working part-time? Well, that's where budgeting comes in. And I know, budgeting sounds boring and restrictive. But think of it as simply being intentional about your money. It's about making sure your money is working for you, not the other way around. When you're creating your budget, the goal isn't to deprive yourself of all enjoyment. It's about making sure you're prioritizing your emergency fund right alongside your other financial responsibilities. And if you're already feeling stretched thin, consider looking for small expenses you can cut back on, even temporarily, to free up some extra cash. But here's the thing, cutting costs isn't the only way to build an emergency fund. Increasing your income can be just as powerful, if not more. Maybe it's taking on a side hustle, selling items you no longer need, or even asking for a raise at work if you feel you deserve one. Any extra money you bring in can go straight into your emergency fund, giving it a nice little boost. Now, once you've started putting money away, it's super important to keep that money separate from your regular spending. Open a dedicated savings account, preferably one that's not too easy to dip into. Some people even choose an online bank account that takes a couple of days to transfer money back to their checking account. That delay can be enough to stop you from making impulse withdrawals. Another thing to keep in mind is to regularly review and adjust your emergency fund goals. Life changes, and so do your financial needs. Maybe you just got married, had a baby, or bought a house. Whatever it is, your emergency fund should reflect your current situation. So, make it a habit to revisit your goals and adjust your savings plan accordingly. And if you're sitting there thinking, this all sounds great, but it's still just too hard, I get it. Starting something new can feel overwhelming. But remember, even the smallest steps matter. Saving just a little bit every week or every month is better than doing nothing at all. And over time, those small contributions will add up. One thing that can really help keep you motivated is reminding yourself why you're doing this. It's not just about money, it's about peace of mind. It's about giving yourself the ability to handle life's unexpected moments without having to panic or go into debt. It's about having choices and being in control of your future. Building an emergency fund is like building a wall of protection around you and your loved ones. And every time you add to that fund, you're strengthening that wall. But what happens when you finally reach your goal? What do you do with that money, and how do you make sure it's there when you need it most? Alright, so you've started building your emergency fund, maybe even hit that first milestone of $500 or $1,000. And as you keep adding to it, you start to feel that sense of security growing. But here's the thing, saving money is only half the battle. The other half is making sure that money is actually there when you need it most. So, let's talk about protecting your emergency fund and making sure it serves its purpose when life decides to throw another curveball your way. First of all, your emergency fund should be easily accessible but not too easy. That means keeping it in a savings account where you can get to it when needed but not so easily that you're tempted to dip into it for non-emergencies. It's really important to draw a clear line between wants and needs. Your emergency fund is there for true emergencies, things like unexpected medical expenses, major car repairs, urgent home repairs, or sudden job loss. It's not meant for vacations, new gadgets, or splurging on something just because it's on sale. One way to help protect your emergency fund is by setting some rules for yourself. For example, only touching that money if something absolutely essential comes up. And if you do have to use it, your priority should be to start building it back up as soon as possible. Think of it like a safety net you need to keep strong at all times. Another question that comes up a lot is, shouldn't I invest my emergency fund to make it grow faster? And look, I get it. Seeing your money just sitting in a savings account earning tiny interest rates can feel frustrating. But here's the thing, your emergency fund's job isn't to grow your wealth, it's to protect you when life goes sideways. Investing that money might sound like a good idea, but investments come with risk. If the market takes a dip right when you need to access that money, you could end up with far less than you saved. And that defeats the whole purpose of having an emergency fund in the first place. So, instead of trying to make that money grow, focus on keeping it safe and accessible. Of course, if you've already built up a solid emergency fund and you want to start investing for the long term, that's great. But make sure your safety net is in place first before taking on those risks. Remember, stability before growth. Now, let's talk about one more thing that often gets overlooked, the emotional and psychological benefits of having an emergency fund. This is about more than just money. It's about peace of mind, confidence, and knowing that you have options when things go wrong. Imagine going to bed at night without that gnawing anxiety about how you're going to handle the next financial surprise. Imagine making decisions from a place of strength instead of fear. That's what an emergency fund gives you. And that feeling alone is worth all the effort it takes to build it. And here's the thing, even if you haven't reached your savings goal yet, just having something set aside can make a big difference. Knowing you're actively working toward that safety net is empowering. It's a reminder that you're taking control of your financial future instead of just reacting to whatever life throws at you. But remember, it's a journey. Building an emergency fund isn't something you do overnight. It's about progress, not perfection. Maybe you're only able to save a little bit each month. That's okay. Keep going. Every dollar you save is a step closer to financial security. So, where do you go from here? If you haven't started building your emergency fund yet, start today. Even if it's just $10, $20, or whatever you can afford to set aside. The most important thing is getting started and building that habit of saving regularly. If you've already started, keep going. Challenge yourself to find new ways to save or earn a little extra to boost your fund. Celebrate those milestones along the way, whether it's reaching your first $500 or finally hitting that 3-month safety net. And most importantly, keep your emergency fund safe. Protect it like the valuable tool it is. Because at the end of the day, this is about giving yourself the gift of peace of mind, security, and freedom. It's about building a solid foundation that allows you to face whatever life throws your way with confidence. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Are you already working on building your emergency fund? What strategies have been working for you, and what challenges are you facing? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your experiences might just help someone else who's trying to figure this out. And hey, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. We're all in this journey together, and I'm here to help you build a better financial future, one step at a time. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.